You're darn right. This is Harvard Community Radio, and this is the Northern Sky Jazz Show, and I am here this evening with special guest Chris Madsen. Hello, Chris.
Hello. How are you, Billy?
I'm doing very well. So I really thank you for coming out. You made a long trip out here, so we could talk about your music and the recordings you've done, your life in jazz, and, so I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I actually don't have as far to drive as a lot of my Chicago jazz musician colleagues, because I'm actually coming from the northern suburbs of Chicago. Right. So it's, I kind of get that first leg of the drive out of the way already. So, and I'm used to the country too, living up north like that.
That's
so
right. Yeah, you're in Lake County. So
yeah, exactly.
Our neighboring county. So it's not so bad. Like, we had Chris Green out here, and it was a long journey for him to come out from Evanston. But,
I bet.
I hope he appreciated the cornfield and the drive-through too. But so really, thanks for coming out here. And hey, I want to apologize too. I think I in the promo for this, I think I got your latest release. I thought was pop art, but it's actually the Beiderbecke.
No, it is pop art.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
okay. So I did get it right.
Yeah. It's understandable. I mean, the Bix tribute came out in 2011, and pop art came out last year.
It was last year.
So very, very close release dates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll talk more about that kind of stuff too.
Okay.
The first track I did play though was from 2006 from Hidden. And that was a really cool composition. I really enjoyed that. I thought that would be a cool one to start off with. I was going to start off with something from pop art. We're going to play plenty of songs from pop art, but I really like that track from Hidden.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's from my New York days. Kind of has for me, it'll always have, maybe it's just because I associate it with that, but the music on Hidden has a real kind of New York feel to it.
It does.
For whatever that means, it means something different to everyone.
Yeah, but it does have a certain, I don't know, it just keeps propelling forward at a certain urgency. It's really cool. Yeah,
for sure. Just like, being stuck in traffic on the FDR or whatever it is.
Right. Let's see. So that was from Hidden. That was from 2006. Now, did you record that here, or did you?
No, that was in Brooklyn.
It was? Okay,
yeah.
So it was from your New York days. Okay,
it
cool.
was, yeah. I was in graduate school at that point.
Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Well, we'll get to that.
Oh yeah, sorry, I don't mean
to yeah,
jump ahead.
It seemed logical to talk about that. But so when you first got started playing music, let's tell our listeners a little bit about who you are. You are a composer. You're a jazz saxophonist. You're a music educator, clinician. You do quite a bit of music and jazz specifically related work.
Definitely.
So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, but I was really interested in how you got started in music. Was it elementary school selecting a saxophone or a clarinet, or what was it that got you started?
Yeah, well, let's see. At this point right now, just like you said, to kind of pick up on that, I'm kind of try to remain active in all three major, branches of jazz, professional jazz, performing and composing and teaching. And I've been just about to start my 6th year as a coordinator of the Jazz Studies program at Northwestern. And that's actually next week where we start our 6th year for that. And then I'm also the director of the jazz program at Midwest Young Artists, which is sort of like a college prep program in Highwood, which is basically right next to Highland Park.
Yeah.
And I just try to be active as a performer, and I write a lot of music in addition to the stuff we'll hear tonight. I really, really am interested in big band composition. I've done lots and lots of big band writing over the years, and it's definitely one of my passions. But as far as the real beginnings of my musical sort of obsession, I guess I was always obsessed with music, and I used to I was always drawn to percussion, especially the drums. I still play the drums. It's like kind of my secondary instrument.
Sure.
And when I was a little kid, I used to have 2 pencils in the car, and I would drum on the dashboard along with my dad's Beatles tapes.
Sure.
Of course,
right.
Back then we were listening to cassette tapes
in
the car. I would drum along with the Beatles recordings that my dad exposed me to when I was a kid. And then it kind of graduated to, I actually got a pair of drumsticks. And then they didn't want me drumming on the dashboard, so they moved me into the back seat. And so I would hit the back of the headrest, you know. So my parents got their fair share of percussion right in their ears when I was a little kid. And then I grew up in a really good public school system, and I started playing. I started on the euphonium when I was 10 or 11 because I wanted to be different, and I'd never heard of the euphonium before. And so I tried it out for a year, and then I figured out that I wanted to play a little bit more of a sexy instrument, you know.
Right.
And it was the early '90s, and the saxophone was kind of part of the culture in a pop music sense at that point.
Sure.
So I was really drawn to that. So I just tried out the alto and then kind of settled on the tenor. And, and lo and behold, there we go.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how long were you playing alto for?
Just a few months, really.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, it was the same thing. It's like everyone else was playing the alto.
Sure.
Because that's what you had to start on.
How old were you then? Was this grade school?
Fourth grade or something like that.
Sure.
And fifth grade, I think, in the early '90s, and so everyone else was playing the alto, and then I was the first one that I wanted to switch over to tenor because I had to be different.
Sure.
Just like the failed attempt at being a euphoniumist didn't work out so well.
You could still break it out, or for any of your recordings, you could still do that.
Yeah, maybe I still got. I just have to remember the fingerings.
So then, when you got to junior high, that's when you first get exposed to jazz band. I would expect. Were you playing pretty seriously, or was it? Were you practicing quite a bit, doing things on your own? How did you develop as a, let's say, maybe musician, player, and then were you also starting to write little tunes or write songs at that age?
Well, I wasn't writing anything until I was in high school, but I do remember. I remember figuring out how to write out the Popeye the Sailor Man melody.
Right.
My dad wanted me to play that really badly, and so he's like, "Hey, why don't you try to play this?" And so I tried kind of writing it out, and I guess that was my first transcription.
Yeah, right.
So I just wrote it out on. I didn't even have staff paper. I just drew 5 lines on a piece of white paper and just tried to write it. It was the crudest, composition or transcription I ever did.
I hope you still have that because it'll be very valuable one day.
Unfortunately, I think that got washed away with the years. And so in junior high, my public school system, I'm very fortunate to grow up in a good public music school system, and so I would practice all the time because my mom kind of had a practice regimen for me done, and she was very supportive and kind of would sit there and listen to me practice and make sure I was doing it because I think she noticed that I had some talent and I was interested in it, but I didn't really love jazz. And then when I got into high school, that's when the jazz bug really kicked in, like very hard, very quick.
What was it about jazz, or was there anything that stuck out or sticks out in your mind as far as a musician you heard or a song?
Well, it was really more of an experience. It was the experience of going to summer music camp in Birch Creek. We were just talking about Door County off the air, but Birch Creek Music Camp up there right before high school, and that was just a huge catalyst for me, being in that environment and seeing other people my age that were into jazz. And then I bought a Charlie Parker compilation, a best of CD, and I just listened to it over and over and over until I started to like it. I mean, frankly, at first, I just didn't like it. I was, 12 years old or whatever, and it was very unlike the stuff that I was used to listening to. But I just forced myself to listen to that Bird album over and over, and then eventually I just became addicted to it.
Yeah. That's if anything, that would be a very challenging person to listen. Well, not necessarily listen to, but to really get into and try to emulate. And so yeah,
for sure, it was. But I just I guess I kind of dove in, to the deep end with that. But I had heard so much about Charlie Parker. Everyone was talking about him, and all my teachers and everything. So I figured, well, I guess I better start with the best. And so to this day, I worship the ground that he walked on. He's arguably one of the greatest musical minds ever, let alone of jazz in the 20th century.
Yeah, well, he's the one that you could argue Dizzy too, but codified that jazz language.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Definitely came up with many of those ideas.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If not most of them.
Yeah.
Pretty remarkable what he did. Well, that's interesting to me. So, because you I would presume then you were also studying classical music.
Kind of. I mean, in the sense that I had to be in concert band and stuff.
Okay.
But it was really more. It wasn't sort of an in-depth study of classical style. It was just kind of playing in the concert band, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I chose the saxophone because I wanted to play stuff that was different than classical music.
Sure.
You know, I wanted to do other stuff, and it just so happened that jazz I just had an affinity for it, you know, and so I just kind of ran with it.
Okay. Well, because when I've been listening to your music, it doesn't sound like you've listened exclusively to jazz. I mean, and certainly jazz is so varied, and there's so much to absorb. Just thinking back to Charlie Parker, how he had listened to, Stravinsky or whomever it was that inspired him to play what he did and play differently and incorporate some different sounds into jazz rather than just, swing. What did he do with it? So for you too, I hear some of that. Was there anything else? It was really more, you saw it as a vehicle. You could play something different. You can play something you enjoy. Mm-hmm. And then in high school, you're really pretty absorbed.
That was it. I mean, when I was about 13, I knew, after I went to that camp, I knew that this was for me and that this would be a long-term thing for me. I mean, I always kind of, like I said, since I was little, I always was finding ways to make music, even with just like banging on, the dashboard of my car. But eventually it was, I figured out, what really drew me to jazz was when I started to understand the complexities behind the music, and well, these things called chord changes, and those chord changes imply scales, and there's this scale is altered this way.
All the theory behind it.
Yeah. That was it was like a real eye opener to me. It made me realize, wow, there's so much underneath the surface here. And then I started to listen on a deeper level. And I mean, I think that I'm sure it's a similar story to a lot of other musicians, but for me, it was just understanding the depth and substance behind this stuff that I never realized was there before, And playing the saxophone, I mean, it's only a matter of time before you play in jazz band, and it's very difficult to play the saxophone and not be exposed to jazz or pop music or anything,
Yeah, well, it's the prevalent. I would argue, aside from piano.
Oh yeah.
And then your rhythm instruments, but piano and saxophone so prevalent.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's so important to jazz.
Definitely.
Well, we're here with Chris Madsen on the Northern Sky Jazz Show on Harvard Community Radio. We're gonna listen to another song. How about that?
Sounds great.
This one is called Heart and Sky, and this is from the Pop Art recording that just came out in 2012, last year. And this one, again, features Chris Madsen on the saxophone. So thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll listen to a couple songs, and then we'll be back to talk to Chris some more. Well, thanks for tuning in to the Northern Sky Jazz Show. This is Billy Denk, and I'm here with special guest Chris Madsen. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
And we're having a good discussion off air about music, and we're going to continue that. We want to go back though to you were in high school, but then when you went to college, you went to DePaul. And you was it jazz studies there that you were involved with? Okay.
Yes.
And so maybe even high school, college, was there anybody that mentored you that you remember? Or was a lot of it self-study? I mean, who do you give credit for really steering you in that direction? Because you went to graduate school, so to study music.
Right. Boy, there were a lot. Again, I mean, I'll just go back to it. I was just very fortunate to grow up where I did. There was, especially when I was growing up, there was kind of a real good atmosphere for jazz at the high school that I went to.
Where was
Libertyville
that?
High School?
Okay.
Yeah, and so there was a handful of people there who were very passionate about improvisation and jazz, and so I kind of got to be in that environment, and from the time I started high school, I was just kind of cultivated by those people. They were my peers, and my friends, and I just, it was infectious. We would have combo rehearsal twice a week, and every week it would just be a hang where they would put on the new, whatever the new CD was, and we'd check it out, and a combo rehearsal would go for hours and hours, for example. And then my band director was extremely inspirational, Don Shoup, who I just actually had lunch with yesterday and just kind of picked his brain about education. He was a great motivation for me. And there's just, the list kind of goes on and on. I just, I don't know. I'd like to think that even if I was kind of forced to be a self-motivator, that I still would have turned out to be a musician. But I guess, I'll never know.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very fortunate to have a lot of people around me that kind of steered me and validated my interest in music.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to know Bob Lark when I was in high school, because he would come and he would work with our jazz band in high school. And so I was studying with Mark Colby when I was a senior, and it just kind of seemed natural to want to go to DePaul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I did mention was the song that we heard. Your song was "Heart and Sky" from Pop Art. That's your latest release from 2012, last year. We also heard Eberhard Weber, "An Evening with Eberhard Weber." Anyway, it's an ECM recording from Colors of Chloe. So I thought, hey, it's kind of a cool song to play after yours. And so Pop Art just came out last year, and so I hope all your DePaul fans are listening to that too.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I've gotten some feedback on it from even some people that are in school now.
So Mark Colby's listening to it.
Well, I think so. Yeah, boy, he better be.
Right.
He'll hear from me if he isn't.
So then you were inspired to go to DePaul because you had some really good teachers, and some you really were getting immersed in jazz in high school, and then DePaul. Tell us about how that developed for you.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was just, DePaul was a great combination of good faculty and students that were motivating. But I think it was at DePaul that I really discovered the power of practicing. I mean, I practiced in high school a fair amount, but it was at DePaul where every day I had the same routine down, and I just drilled it home. I got my doubles happening, which they're not happening anymore, but they were at the time. I had a doubles regimen, and I had my improvisation regimen and sound production, all the individual facets. I had it worked out, and so I was kind of a monk, a jazz monk for 4 years there. And I just really, really put my nose to the grindstone and worked hard. And it was there that I developed my interest in, it was, again, it just kind of exploded all of a sudden in big band arranging.
Okay.
DePaul has a wonderful big band led by Bob Lark, who's a fantastic jazz pedagogue, and just inspired by the music we played. And I figured, wow, I want to try this. It's so interesting. I want to try writing for big band, and Bob was really supportive too. I would bring I would bring charts in to rehearsal, and he would agree to play them on concerts or anything like that. So I just got the positive reinforcement, and I definitely caught the arranging, composing bug when I was there.
Yeah, well, it's one thing I've noticed with your original compositions on the 3 recordings that we're going to play and have been featuring, is that there's a lot of thought put into the arrangement.
No, thank you.
Piece of it.
Yeah, I hope so.
The improvisation is really terrific, but the songs themselves are structured very well, and so it probably makes it they're really good vehicles for you to improvise over.
No, thanks.
But yeah, some really nice stuff in there.
Thanks.
And then when we hear the. I don't know if you did the arrangement for Candlelights. We're going to play that a little bit later from the Big Spider Bick.
Yeah, I did. I did the arrangement.
Okay,
so, on that one.
We can hear an example of your arrangement. Sure. No, it's with your trio, but still another example of that. So in DePaul, then you were getting a chance really to do arranging for big band, and then so I would presume then even more theory, and then having to do composition as part of your coursework. So were you starting to churn out original pieces at that point?
Oh, you mean like tunes?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, you know.
You did say you were doing some big band arranging, but you were writing for big band too. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was doing arrangements and originals for big band, you know, and then in the combo setting, they gave us a lot of room to bring in whatever we wanted to bring in. So I would most of the time bring in an original tune for combo too. So yeah, it was a good environment to you know, to learn about composition from Tom Matta, who's a great arranger in Chicago. You know, I mean, his reputation is obvious. And so kind of being around him and being able to bring in original tunes and have them workshopped and recorded, it was great. It was, yeah, I learned a lot. I feel like I improved a lot over those 4 years. And again, I practiced a lot, you know, more than I've never been a huge practicer, someone that locks himself away for 8 hours or anything, but I got close to that
Sure.
at DePaul.
So did you have any time to start forming your own groups or do any gigging at that point, or was it really focused on the education?
Yeah, that's funny. I was doing a lot of gigs as a sideman, but I don't think I did any gigs as a leader when I was at DePaul. I was playing, you know, in wedding bands, jobbing bands a lot, sort of just kind of logging the hours doing those kind of gigs, and they were enjoyable. But you know, I would play jazz gigs, but mostly as a sideman.
Sure.
I didn't really have the chance to. Well, I had the chance. I just for some reason didn't have the motivation to go out and do a lot of gigs as leader. Finding gigs has always been a challenge for me.
Yeah,
you know,
it is for a lot of us.
for sure. Yeah.
Well, we're talking to Chris Madsen here on the Northern Sky Jazz Show. You know, why don't we go listen to the Chris Madsen Trio? So this is a group you formed a few years ago, and was the intention to do projects like Chris Madsen plays Bix Beiderbecke, or
yeah, pretty much. I mean, that ended up being, you know, I knew when I kind of formed the group, which was kind of an offshoot of a gig that we were doing with a singer, Rose Colella. We used to play at the Club 3160 on a weekly basis, and we were basically her rhythm section, and so we would play together weekly. And then I thought, let's do a project. I was really discovering the music of Bix at that point, and I thought, you know, it'd be a really cool project to do because, you know, especially people our age in the mainstream jazz scene, you know, there's not a lot of tributes to early jazz artists like that. So I thought it'd be something unique to do. And the music, I mean, I could go on and on about the lineage between Bix and Frankie Trumbauer, and then Lester Young, and then Stan Getz, and then players that have really influenced me. But yeah, I just Bix's music, I'd never really heard anything like it produced at that point, and so you know, I thought we'd try our hand at it. And yeah, I was really pleased with the result. And
it still has your stamp on it.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so.
Well, why don't we listen to it? This is Candlelights by the Chris Madsen Trio from the. Is it the Chris Madsen Trio plays Bix Beiderbecke?
You got it.
Hey, all right. Well, you're listening to Northern Sky Jazz Show. Here is Chris Madsen Trio playing Candlelights. Well, thanks for tuning in to the Northern Sky Jazz Show. This is Billy Denk with special guest Chris Madsen. And that last song we heard was Kenny Burrell's song. And Chris correctly identified the saxophone player as
Coleman Hawkins.
Right away. It was almost like, give me a couple bars, I can tell you who this is. he got it right away. This is Coleman Hawkins. Yeah, you're right.
Well, you know, he's very identifiable, seriously. I mean,
yeah, he's got that really lush, breathy tone and great vibrato. So, very cool. And that song was called I Thought About You. Before that, however, we heard the Chris Madsen Trio playing Candlelights. And that's off the Chris Madsen Trio plays Bix Beiderbecke from, what year was it, 2011?
Yep.
Very cool. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to go back to your, you know, transformation into a jazz musician, educator. First, we'll do our Northern Sky Jazz birthdays. And then we're going to talk about a few events coming up, but I think we really want to get back to who Chris Madsen is and what he's done in jazz. Also, while I'm talking about this, if you are on Facebook, go to the Northern Sky Jazz Show page and say hello to Chris. Send us a text, whatever you can do to let us know you're listening. We see Dave DePompeo listening, Rose Coella, who you know.
That's right.
So thanks for listening, everybody. Let's see. Jazz birthdays on the 18th today. Emily Remler, who wrote the song East to West, a somewhat of a standard, modern standard, the late, great guitar player. Steve Coleman, alto saxophone. You should be aware of Steve Coleman. Sure. We've got Red Mitchell on bass. Jelly Roll Morton, one of the progenitors and originators of jazz piano. We have Chico Hamilton on the drums. John Coltrane, who we heard earlier in the show, tenor sax. Les McCann on piano. Les McCann was, when was he most prominent? In the 60s?
I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Eddie Harris and Les McCann and those guys. Bill Connors, one of my favorite guitar players, more of a fusion player. So several great birthdays in the upcoming week. We also have some events coming up. This Friday, Jazz on the Square will have a jazz jam, 7 to 9. That's hosted by John Nelson on trumpet and me on guitar. And then and it's at Stage Left Cafe, of course, in Woodstock. Then the following night, Saturday night, Stage Left Cafe in the Woodstock Opera House is celebrating the 10th anniversary of Stage Left Cafe. There'll be performances by Off Square Music, the folk music organization. Stage Leftovers, John Hegner, Cassandra Vosteman, and my group, the Glass Ensemble, for Jazz on the Square. So it should be a lot of fun. That starts at 7 o'clock. Tonight there are some jams out here in McHenry County. We've got the Liquid Blues Jam with the Ian Hall Band. That starts around 10. And we also have the Suds R Us Jam in Crystal Lake. That's with the Scroney Brothers, the Hustlers. A lot of blues and rock, R&B, but they do have some jazz musicians come. All those guys are jazz musicians anyway. They like to rock.
Hey, man, who doesn't?
It's pretty cool. And then tomorrow night at Duke's Ale House, we have the Jim Seidel and Rick Embach duo, vibraphone and bass. Pretty cool stuff. So we've got a little bit of jazz going on out here.
Yeah.
But it's more like pastoral jazz. At least the stuff I write. But there is a lot of straight ahead stuff too, and a lot of other good stuff going on. So, all right. So here we are. We're going into the second hour. We just heard some Chris Madsen music. We're going to hear some more original music coming up. But now, Chris.
Yes, sir.
You graduated from DePaul. Did you jump right ahead and go to Juilliard after DePaul?
Yes, I did. I didn't want to waste any time. I wanted to get my formal education done and get out there on the scene and start to be a professional as early as I possibly could. So straight from DePaul, right when I graduated. In fact, literally 2 days. I remember. The date of my senior recital at DePaul was June 8th, and then on June 10th, I moved to New York City.
Oh, wow.
To get ready for attending Juilliard that fall.
Wow.
So I spent the whole month. I spent the whole summer that year. In New York, just kind of getting acclimated to everything and going to jam sessions every night and going out to see music and just kind of learning my way around.
Sure.
How to get around, on that huge public transit system.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy out there.
Yeah, I know. And so I didn't waste any time. I got it all done right away.
That being said, though, New York, I've been to New York several times. It's a great city, though. Great place to absorb so many different things going on, especially as a musician. So going to Juilliard, of course, you're with like the cream of the crop of young musicians, and then you're going out and playing in the evening. What was it like? Was it intimidating, or was it pretty inspiring, or was it all the above?
Yeah, well, it was definitely both of those. It was. I don't think I realized how intimidating it was until I got a little bit, until I had been back in Chicago for a few years. There are some incredible musicians here in Chicago. I'm a huge advocate of the local talent here. I think we have an amazing. I wouldn't live here if I didn't think so. I think it's a wonderful place. Being here for a few years after having, especially been at Juilliard in its infancy. I joined the Juilliard Jazz program in its third year.
Because it's known primarily as classical music.
Yeah, and dance and
dance,
drama,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so in 2001, they started the jazz program to this, and I remember hearing about it right when it started and thinking, wow, who knew Juilliard would ever have jazz? Third year of the program, I got accepted and I went up there. And so it was still kind of the eyes of the jazz community were kind of on it, and as a result, I was there. I was one of 2 tenor sax players in the school. I felt like the community's eyes were kind of on me indirectly. So, there's a good amount of pressure for a young person to be under, I think, going up there for that. And plus, it's a new city. And the city is stressful by nature, as you know. So yeah, it was very intimidating. But then, you realize, wow, I cannot believe I get to study with these people and all of these students who were just so motivational and just would kick you in the butt every day, and just they would be improving. And so you'd want to improve. It was just incredible. It was a magical place to be for 2 years. I really think I improved unimaginably as far as I'm concerned for over the course of really I was there for 3 years. Over 3 years I just improved so much just being in that environment.
A lot of the pressure of improving, learning, and then just being exposed to so many ideas and sounds. What do you think allowed you to make such great progress when you're out there?
It was being exposed to all of those things on a daily basis. Just being in a town where everyone is trying to do the same thing as you, and there are so many people who are better than you, and they've got everything you've got down plus a lot more. And it's intimidating, but at the same time, it's motivational, and it just forces you to be at your peak at all times.
So this brings up something I think is so important. So in Chicago, we have so many talented folks, and we should not sell any of the musicians short that we have here, because we have so many not only talented but creative folks who have their own sound.
Oh yeah.
And so because it's very competitive in New York, as you were out there and you were learning and you're listening, and folks can do everything you can do. At what point do you not take it so competitively and say, I want to have my own voice, I want to have my own sound?
Well, I think that's kind of a byproduct. I think because there are so many people crammed into one little island, or maybe an island and a borough if you count Brooklyn, So many people functioning at such a high level, crammed onto one tiny little island. You have to be as individualistic as humanly possible, because you have to be able to sort yourself out from the crowd if you're gonna survive. You have to figure out what about you makes you individualistic musically, and highlight that as much as possible in a way that's not cheap, but in a way that's substantial.
Chris, did you have that realization while you were in the midst of it, or was it something later on in reflecting you said, I think I did that, but it was...
I think I was aware of it while I was there. I would kind of take note of what were the trends in live jazz happening in New York at that time. What are the commonalities between all these groups, or what are the commonalities between the other people that play my instrument, and what do I have inside naturally that I can highlight that differentiates me from all those other people? Sure. It's a huge soul search, it's just like you gotta really look inward, even if it sounds corny, and just figure out what is it that I can do to separate myself from everyone else, even if I can't play as fast as half of the other tenor players there. Is there something about my sound that I can enhance that makes me unique, or something?
That's a
whatever
good point.
It is,
Yeah, as a guitar player, I know everybody can play faster than me and more accurately. So yeah, what can I do? Well, and then you think about the time that you were out there in the 2000s, right? Early mid 2000s.
Yeah.
So we just mentioned Steve Coleman's birthday upcoming week. So he'd be an example of somebody kind of created a really unique approach to playing music. Yeah. And you could argue, is it really jazz? I don't know. Improvisation.
Sure.
Were there people that were established out there or up and coming that had an impact on you while you were in New York?
Yeah, absolutely. But especially because I was in the Juilliard institution on a daily basis, it was basically it was mostly the people that I went to school with.
Okay.
And there have been a few of them that have really emerged out onto the international jazz scene. Michael Dees is a very, very well-known trombonist. He's basically like he's extremely popular in the jazz trombone community. He's a very talented and proficient on the instrument and just a natural player, just completely natural. He could play in his sleep, can do anything. A bass player that I played with a lot named Yasushi Nakamura has been playing just with everybody, and he's just these are the types of players and the types of players I get to work with here in Chicago too. It's just like you look for something to criticize about them, but there just isn't anything. They're just so well formed, and I'm so lucky to have played with people like that in New York and now to be surrounded by people like that here too. But yeah, I mean, just so many great faculty members. Of course, my current boss at Northwestern, Victor Goins, and Ben Wolf, the bassist, Lauren Schoenberg, who's been an extremely helpful jazz history influence for me. It was amazing.
Well, why don't we talk more about what you're doing, what you've done in the last few years, and currently we'll listen to some more music by you. This is from Pop Art.
Yeah.
You recorded that with who recorded that with you? Who played on that with you?
Yeah, well, there were two different sessions. It depends on which cut you're going to play. It's either going to be Eric Monska or Michael Rayner on drums, Scott Hesse on guitar, Josh Mosher on piano, and Charlie Kirchen on bass.
Okay.
And I will say the personnel for the Big Spiderbeck album, Joe Policastro on bass,
oh, sure.
Dan Eflin on acoustic guitar, and those guys were as much a part of making that music happen as I was.
Very cool.
Honestly.
Michael Rayner, he's played at our festival before, at least, or did he play? I can't remember if it was at one of our festivals or we've had Tiffany Monique come out and play.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I know he's performed with her. So we're going to hear Money Rollins. Off the Pop Art recording.
This will be Eric Monska on drums.
Okay, very cool. This is Chris Madsen, and we are talking with Chris Madsen here in the Northern Sky Jazz Show. Again, this is a song from his latest recording called Pop Art. This is called Money Rollins. Yeah, you're probably listening on TuneIn, aren't you? I don't know, or HarvardCommunityRadio.com. Very few people, Chris, listen on AM 1610 because I think the signal goes about a mile.
Yeah.
It's pretty lo-fi. But the good news is we have applied for an FM license, and so we may be able to get as far away as Woodstock, Illinois.
Oh, very nice.
Which will be nice for our community. But the most easy way, probably people are listening on TuneIn.com, their TuneIn app, or HarvardCommunityRadio.com. So I want to thank everybody for listening, and it's been a lot of fun talking to Chris, but we're not done. We've got more to talk about. We've just heard a couple cuts from Pop Art, Money Rollins, which is a great non-Sonny Rollins tribute. Really cool. And then the title cut, Pop Art. So you recorded that last year. You were talking a little bit about that process. We're talking off air about the instrumentation. Much of it is conventional jazz instrumentation. When I mean that, acoustic bass, drums. There's guitar on there, saxophone. Do we have some piano?
Yeah,
and then
acoustic piano
on that. And maybe the only difference we were talking about is the guitar. You pointed out the guitar had some chorusing effect on there. It was pretty subtle, though. I mean, so it kind of gives it a different width and different kind of tone and sound. But what really makes the recording unique, because if you think about the instrumentation, just like many other jazz groups, what's unique is the composition and what you guys are playing.
Sure.
Would you like to talk about when you wrote those songs?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the whole concept behind that album is it's kind of a merge of my interest in early jazz music from, the 1920s, merged somehow with my interest in pop music, especially rock and pop music from the 60s into the 70s. And so, there are a lot of commonalities between those two kinds of music, but one of the more obvious commonalities is the length of the pieces. They're very short. They're 3 minutes or under, maybe a little bit more than that. I mean, they were limited by the recording technology in the 20s, and then by radio play in the 70s. And so I just find that playing shorter songs with shorter solos really forces you to get your point across quickly and to distill all of the extra stuff out of it. When you're only given 8 bars to solo, just like in a Count Basie arrangement from the 30s or something like that, it's like you have these 8 bars and they're just so precious. You don't have 10 minutes to stretch out and get into. I mean, that's another.
Some of those early Charlie Parker recordings.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what he really would have played if he wasn't limited? He was only going to take like 1 or 2 choruses.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I think there's interesting stuff to be done in both of those contexts, but I do think that, for my taste, I enjoy shorter, more concise track lengths in general. I think there's something that it does for the music. Maybe it's my short attention span. I don't know, but it also, in a musical sense, it forces the musicians to do different things instead of stretch out. I've never been a soloist that I really like to sit there and just solo for 5 minutes or something and just really get into like a Coltrane spiritual kind of thing. I mean, I appreciate that. I love it, and it's a challenge, but it's just I've always preferred a shorter, more succinct, concise statement that it really forces you to feel like this is all I've got. I've got to make it count. Every single note has to count. Wayne Shorter was able to, all those Blue Note albums he did in the 60s, which are basically like they're basically like my Bible for how, composition should sound, to a large degree. He was able to do that over his tunes where he had maybe 1 or 2 choruses, but every single note has such importance and weight that it just connects with the listener. It's so emotional and so perfectly, constructed and improvised at the same time. And so I wanted to get into that. I wanted to sort of do pop song form where you have verse, chorus, bridge, verse, whatever it is, but have the style be straight ahead jazz. So all the tunes on Pop Art are constructed based around what you call standard pop song format, not using traditional jazz, AABA solos, and then back to AABA. It's different. You have a solo, and then you have an interlude, and then you have a piano solo, and then you go back to the melody, and then it jumps to the. So it's kind of like early Dixie, early jazz arrangements were very much like that also. So there's another similarity in the form between early jazz and classic rock
That's
music.
interesting.
Yeah, it's really when you start to dig in there, you see the similarities. So that was my idea with Pop Art.
Yeah.
And so I was happy with the way it came out, and those guys learned these tunes, these complicated forms. They learned them really quickly, and I'm really appreciative.
So as you're charting these out, did you make it easily identifiable for them?
As much as I could.
Especially, Scott on the guitar. I mean, we were talking about guitar players. I know he can read guitar. He can read music. But most guitar players are, so adamant about not reading. You have to spell it out for us.
Right. Well, he worked on his own also. I mean, he learned this stuff on his own.
Sure.
And, and I knew he would, and he's got such a unique sound and approach. And it was his idea to use the chorus. And I thought it blended so perfectly with the piano. When they're both comping at the same time, it's just like this lush. One of my students called it kind of a shoegaze. It's a reference to like the shoegaze aesthetic of
those
the
90s groups.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they just blend together, and it's this huge wall of chord. And I just love the way that sounds.
I think it'd be cool. You should do Chris Madsen meets My Bloody Valentine. That'd be really pretty fun.
Wow, there you go. You just decided the title of my next project.
So then, so different song structures than, A, B, A, and then we were talking about this too. You pointed this out. You're not doing, 2-5-1 chord progressions throughout, or any cycles of those, or anything like that necessarily. In some instances, getting some chord progression ideas from other pop groups or rock groups, or coming up with your own as well. But the one you described from Monty Rollins was similar to Steely Dan.
Yeah, that one's actually kind of a hybrid of two Steely Dan tunes, Monkey in My Soul or Monkey in Your Soul, I forget what it's called, from Pretzel Logic, and then the piano solos over a part of, I think, Deacon Blues. So you've got these two, and neither of them are what I would call pop chord progressions. Steely Dan is very far away from that. Yeah,
more on the jazz side, you could argue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Not standard jazz progressions, but jazzy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And they were using extended harmony. Just like jazz musicians do. So it's not a chord by chord transcription of those tunes, but it's very heavily influenced by those two to sort of make this new thing.
Yeah,
Monty Rollins.
Well, and that's what's really, really fascinating, is finding inspiration in other types of music and then incorporating that into your own sound, identifiable sound. I think if you listen to the history of jazz music, you're gonna hear that. I mean, we were talking at the beginning of the show about Charlie Parker. Obviously, Charlie Parker came up in the swing tradition, probably somewhat before that, having grown up in Kansas City. But how did he? It was incorporating new ideas, new sounds, and then the history of jazz is full of examples where people want to do something different, or they find inspiration in a different way. But when I hear that, I'm not hearing Steely Dan, certainly.
Right. Sure. And it's so funny too, Bird, I think at that time in the later 30s, I don't know that it was Bird's intention to cause a musical revolution. I think he was just doing what he did, and it just so happened that it happened to be revolutionary, and everyone else plays like that from that moment on. And I feel like today, it's like our duty to be Bird or Train or Miles. And we're not all destined to be these enormously influential innovators. We're all destined to make the music that we want to make, or that feels the best for us to make. And if it happens to catch on and cause a revolution, that's great, but it probably won't.
It's pretty good it's a good way of looking at it. It's a good outlook, because you could be trying too hard to be an innovator rather than just express yourself, right? Right.
Yeah, I think you see, forced innovation quite a bit in jazz, and I think if you force it, it's just like a relationship, or like a square peg in a round hole. It's not going to work. Just do what feels right, and if you set out to be an innovator, you probably won't be.
Well, the songs on pop art don't sound forced or contrived. I mean,
thank you.
That's one thing I know, having written music or listening to other people's music. You can really, at least for myself, my own experience, if I'm trying too hard, it doesn't sound doesn't flow. It doesn't seem like it's natural. It doesn't seem musical. It just sounds like an exercise or some technical, exhibition of what I think it should be, rather than this is just something that should be coming out of me freely.
Right.
So how do you get, because you thought through these compositions. I know you put a lot of time and thought into them. How do you keep them fresh or flowing?
Well, I mean, I think it helps to have an overarching idea, and like I said, that idea for pop art was I wanted all of the tunes to be in that sort of standard pop song format, and I wanted to use harmony and progressions and melodies that I found relevant and interesting. But I knew I had to squeeze it into this format. And so I would transcribe songs by Joni Mitchell or whatever, and I would use the form that she used in one of her songs, but I would write my own chord progression and melody to fit into that. So, I think it's very, this is maybe a little bit of a tangent, but I've sort of been thinking more about this lately. It's very difficult to create something completely from scratch. I think everything is based off of something else. And just like you said, you would never hear Steely Dan and Monty Rollins, but it's almost exclusively based off of those progressions. So, I've always been, someone that steals ideas that I feel are move me, and try to rearrange them in a way that sounds and feels unique.
Sure.
And having that overarching thought for the album, this is jazz in a pop song format. That helped me to sort of that guided things. The rest of it kind of fell into place.
That would be no different than how many countless songs are based on blues changes that still sound fresh or original, or rather than do the blues chords necessarily, you can use the form and substitute chords that are really strange or whatever inspires you.
Like Solar. Solar is it a blues? I don't know, maybe. Not really.
Right. So there's always inspiration in other music, and I think it's a legitimate way. I think most great musicians do this, right? They find that inspiration, and what do? That, again, we've been talking about it all evening, is kind of what is it that you have to say? What is your means of expression?
And just one more thing to add to that is I don't know how to play the songs that I transcribed. I'm not a pop musician. I'm a jazz musician. So my charge was taking that inspiration and putting it inside of a jazz context, because that's what I know how to do. That's what I've been training to do for the majority of my life at this point. So that's what I felt comfortable doing. And so I wanted it to still be unequivocally jazz. It needs to feel like jazz and sound like jazz, because that's what I know how to do. So using those songs as inspiration for that was kind of my MO for that.
Yeah. Well, anything you'd like to add? Anything you're working on? No, you talked about working, coordinating the jazz studies program at Northwestern.
Yeah.
The program in Highwood.
Yep. Midwest Young Artists.
Yep. Any other endeavors you're working on, or?
I've got as far as recordings as a leader, I've got some stuff on the back burner that's probably going to stay there for a little while. But the next thing I'm performing at that I'm really excited about is I'll be playing at the Hyde Park Jazz Festival.
Oh, nice, yeah.
With Joel Adams's group, the Chicago Yes Tet, and that's on Sunday, the 20
next weekend, right?
Yeah, week from this coming Sunday.
Okay.
I think it's the 28th.
Oh, okay.
I think
so
it's the 28th.
A week and a half or so.
Yeah. So that's a really, really interesting group. Talk about, a unique sensibility. There's a spoken word artist with that, and there's a singer, and you've got jazz and R&B and everything mixed in. So Joel Adams, it's a really, really cool group. Chicago Yes.
Do you know where that's going to be? Which venue that's going to be at?
I don't know offhand, no, but I'm sure it's easily Googleable.
So for our listeners, the Hyde Park Jazz Festival takes place Hyde Park, Illinois, or Chicago, near University of Chicago, but they have several different venues where performers play. I think last year they had a couple of big stages, kind of on that. I don't know what you call that. That section between the boulevards on that big green.
Oh
way.
Yeah, what is it? The mall or something?
The mall.
I'm not sure what they call it.
Yeah. And then they had Paulina Garcia and Augusta Grachnia at a church. They had some smaller clubs or different venues. It was really pretty cool, and I think they'll do the same thing again this year.
Yeah, they do a great job down there for the fest.
And then I saw you last week. I heard you and Andy Brown perform at St. Charles Jazz Weekend. You played there a few. Was it all 3 nights that you were there, or 2 nights?
2 nights, Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
Or no, I'm sorry, Friday and Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, with me and Andy.
that was incredible. I mean, we should talk a little bit about that before we have to go. But
I'm sure.
It was so cool because Andy Brown on guitar and you on saxophone, and that was it. And what was really cool, you weren't doing really original music. Well, I heard you. It was standards.
Yeah, all standards.
The, Great American Songbook songs. But interweaving melodic ideas, harmonic ideas as you're playing, and it was really pretty special. It was really cool.
Thank you. I'm glad you liked it. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Andy's just he's just a monster player. I mean, he's just a. Oh, whoops! Sorry, I knocked the table.
I hope Andy heard that.
Yeah, Andy, that one's for you. No, Andy's a phenomenal player, and just the greatest accompanist you could ask for as a horn player. He knows every songbook standard you could ever want, and he's just so responsive, and he's interesting and creative and swinging, and melodic. And so, when we get to play duets, I'm just in heaven because he knows every tune in any key, and he's willing to go any direction that you want to go. We were there last year for the Jazz Fest in St. Charles, and we're there this year. We just finished this year, and hopefully we'll be back next year too.
Well, good, very good. Yeah. Well, Chris, thanks for stopping out here, coming all the way out here, and we appreciate it. I hope we can have you come out here again sometime.
I hope so. Thank you so much for having me, Billy.
Yeah, we're going to hear a couple tunes. We're going to wrap up with a couple more songs from Chris Madsen. This is from his 2006 recording, Hidden. This is called Molasses, and then we're going to end with another mystery from his latest recording, Pop Art. But thanks again, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, you're listening to the Northern Sky Jazz Show here on Harvard Community Radio.